and welcome to another episode of 50 Shades in Grey. Now today, my guest that was on the show suddenly cancelled on me last minute, which is unavoidable as always. So it meant that we had to think on our feet a little bit. So we went to the emails that we had, and as luck would have it, actually, we'd already received a question in that someone wanted to take a look at. So we thought we'd do a short podcast on that today. So this is the question. Do you think it's realistic for a man to stay in a marriage where you know there's no romance, sex, true love, everything has changed between you? How could a man just continue and not want to discuss it or do something about it? Now, firstly, got to say from the get-go, I've never been married. So I haven't had the experience of being in a long relationship where that may happen. I've been in relationships where that's happened after a few years, and I don't think this is just men as well. I think this is men and women in relationships generally. And from speaking to friends that have been married a long time and have stayed in those marriages, all the stories on the socials that we do with you all and the audience, there are a lot of people that are in these situations. So I think to look at it, first of all, I think romance and sex, it depends where you place romance and sex in a relationship, I guess. I think to a lot of people, they can mean completely different things. I know for some people, they're really important. For others, less so on the agenda. They value things in a partner far more than physical touch or romance, and other partners don't. So I think what can happen after a period of time is that you change as people in a relationship. And I think that's due to a number of reasons. One of you staying at home and bringing up the kids. I think that is often a story that I hear where more often than not, it's the woman that stayed at home, given up her career to raise the kids. She's done that, and the husband goes out to work, or the partner goes out to work, and their sort of life evolves and moves on. And the person that stays at home looking after the children, their life becomes the children. And then it's an all-consuming job, which I think sometimes people that haven't done it and looked after the kids full time, they don't realise how demanding that job is. And I think the relationship can get lost in bringing up kids. You know, kids getting in bed every night doesn't always help the relationship. And that's hard to avoid sometimes. And I think a lot of these things are hard to avoid. When I've spoke to people, you know, Roger from the show, for instance, when I spoke to Roger about, you know, the secret to a long-lasting relationship, he said to me that they put each other before the kids. Now, I've never had that. I've never been with someone that I've had kids with long enough to have that. And I think that would be completely different, because every relationship that I had, being a single parent with my son, Zach, he came before everyone. And that would never change, and that won't change. And I would understand that in someone else. But I know a lot of the women that I met, they found that very difficult. They understood it, but they found it extremely difficult, that because I was so the other way and putting him forward in front of everything. But I think when you speak to a lot of people, that's their take on it. But when I've then spoke to people that have been in relationships and had the children in the relationships with the partner they was with, they have said to me, no, like my husband or my wife comes before the kids. They come second to the relationship. And they seem to be relationships that really stand the test of time, I think, because it must be difficult spending all those years with someone, especially when you change so much. And if you're not constantly working at the relationship, I think you probably wake up one day when the kids start to get to the end of even primary school and suddenly think, you know, we're strangers, you know, we're completely different people now. And I think that's where a lot of separations maybe start to be spoke about, and one person realises that it's just too far for them to go back to the relationship now, and they've sort of left it in their heart a long, long time ago. And I think that's very important personal opinion, and it is only opinion, so it's not advice. I'm obviously not trained in this in any way, but from my experience, I think I need love and physical relationship within that relationship. That's important to me. And I know that's not the same for everyone. And I know that changes over time from speaking to friends, especially with women through menopause. That can be obviously a a part of it that their sexual drive diminishes. But I've known that in men, that women have told me that, they're just not interested. And I think this is where they're hard conversations to have, and they're honest conversations to have about where you are, both of you, in the relationship and what you want out of it. Has that changed since you first met, whether that be 3 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later? We do change as people. So in answer to the question, I think it's about constant communication with each other to see where you actually are in the relationship. I think true love, I think there's so many forms of love as well. I think you can permanently be in a state of falling in love. As we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you ever get to that stage of being in love, because you always want to be feeling more and more. Surely after 10 years, you're going to love someone more than you did after 5 years. And after 15 years, you're going to love them more. Or do you just love them in a different way? Does that love sort of go out of that physical attraction and then go into more of a friendship and wanting to be with someone like you would a family member as opposed to a partner? And do people change in terms of what they actually want in a relationship? So in the beginning, does one of them, want all these things, that physical touch and love and holding hands, and the other one does, until they reach a certain point where they feel like they don't need that anymore, but they want companionship and they want someone to go out to dinner with, and they want someone to come home to, and someone that's there on the couch next to them when they're watching TV. But maybe the person they're sitting next to wants completely different to that. Maybe the person next to them wants to be still cuddling up to them. That's they're conversations I think that you really need to have with your partner to find out where you are. If you're with someone that doesn't want to talk about it, for me, that doesn't leave you any option. Where do you go from there? You must have to have these difficult conversations with people. And I've had them said to me, and I've also had them with other people, and they're never nice, because as we're constantly saying in this podcast, no one is a really bad person. I don't think no one sets out to actually ruin someone's life. They just get to a point where they need to make a decision that is going to hurt the other person. And what do you do then? I remember one said to me, it was after a breakup, and I didn't want the breakup to happen. I was quite sad about it, actually. There was one thing that the person said to me before they left, and it was really simple, but it really stopped me in my tracks, and it's always stayed with me. And they said to me, I couldn't stay. I'm just not happy. Now, when someone says that to you, what more can you say back to that? How can you convince someone to stay? Because it's not the right thing to do. They've told you they are not happy. And would you want someone there that's not happy in the first place anyway? Would you be content coming home to someone that you think, well, they're not happy, but I am? Because the whole time, they don't want to be with you. And it's not that they may want to be with someone else. They just want the opportunity to be happy doing whatever that may be, sort of being on their own, being single and having independence and just doing exactly what they wanted to do all the time without consulting anyone first. I think sometimes you've got to know that yourself as well. Like sometimes you've got to think to yourself exactly those words. I can't stay, I'm not happy. If it's a case of I'm not happy, but I want to stay, then that's a completely different conversation that you need to have. That's a conversation of, look, this is how I feel. I don't want this to end, but you need to do something about it. Otherwise it's going to get to a point of where I am going to go. And I've had that conversation a few times, and that can happen quite early in relationships as well. That can be like, right, I know where we are now. I don't like it. Like if we can sort it out and don't come back here, then that's fine. But if we keep coming back to this point, I know myself, I'm going to go. So I think in answer to the question that we had, I think you need to have that conversation and be honest with yourself and say, can you stay if you're not happy? And people stay for all different reasons. I know lots of people that have stayed in relationships because of kids. And I always wonder if that's the right thing to do or not. I had a similar decision to make myself, but I knew that I wasn't happy, and the person I was with wasn't happy. So did we want our child to have two unhappy parents that when they go and chase their own life, eventually we're left looking at each other going, what now? What do we do now? Have we wasted sort of the last 15 years and of trying to find happiness with someone else, or are we going to have a go at this? And I'm sure for some people it may work. And for some people, they probably think they're doing the right thing. I just wonder, in those situations, when your kids get to 35, 40, and I've spoke to people that have had these conversations with their kids, most of the time, 8 times out of 10, it's the same story where they'll be with their kids and, they'll say to their kids, well, I've stayed with your father, or I've stayed with your mother all these years and I haven't been happy. And the kids at that age then turn around and go, why? Why? Why didn't you leave? Well, because of the kids. I said, we stayed because of you. And I think the kids will go, well, you should have done. You should have done what was right for you, because your kids are going to do what's right for them. And also the other way of looking at it is, if you had a daughter or you had a son, what advice would you give to them? If they came to you one day and they just said, look, I'm dreadfully unhappy, I'm just really not happy in my relationship and I don't know what to do, would your advice be stay, work on a relationship, and even if you're not happy, stay there? Or would it be, listen, work on it, and if you still feel this way after you feel like you've given everything, then you got to go? I know that would be my advice to my son. Definitely, my most important thing to me is the happiness of my son, and I think to everyone it's the happiness of their kids. And your advice would be, you need to make yourself happy. They're tough decisions to have to make sometimes, and they're awkward conversations to have. And yep, the other person may well hate you, but they may thank you for it one day, deep down in the back of their mind, because they may go on to other things and have great experiences and meet other great people that they wouldn't have had that opportunity if they had stayed with you. So I think when you look at this question, if everything has changed between you, then why has everything changed? Has it been because of kids? And is it something that you can claw back? Is it something that you can get back to? And if it is, decide whether it's worth fighting for, and it's something that you want to fight for, because it would be, I would imagine, a lot of work, and you'd probably need to see people that are qualified to help you back on track with that. But you do need to talk about it. And if they don't want to discuss it or do anything about it, they're obviously quite content with where they are in their life with you. And I guess the question is, are you content for that? Because if you're not, I think you know the answer to it yourself. You need to do something about it. And sometimes if you can't have a conversation, send a letter, or don't do it by text, but send a letter or a video even, or write something down. I always remember one of the podcasts that we did with Anna Martha, and she was telling me about her husband, that the book that she wrote, The Uncomfortable Truth, that he was reading, and he read a lot of this stuff that Anna had written down. He sort of turned and said to her, why didn't you tell me this? And she kind of said, yeah, I've been telling you every day for the last 5 years, but you haven't heard me. So it is amazing sometimes that people don't purposely mean not to listen or to hear you, but in everyday life, things get lost. There's kids running around and they've sort of got one ear trying to listen to you and the other ear making sure that, like, the kids outside haven't fallen off their bikes or going too near the road. So sometimes it's finding, I guess, another media by which they can actually listen to on their own without interrupting. Because that's the other thing. I think sometimes when you have these conversations, I know I'm terrible for it, that I'll have conversations with people and things will come into my head to respond to them. And I need to say them, or I feel that I need to say them straight away. So I have to really work on now, like taking a breath and thinking, right, remember that, because you need to say it. And often I don't, because I've got memory of a goldfish. But I think that, maybe sometimes if people gave you stuff in a video or a voice note, that they can listen to it and they tend not to interrupt, because they know if they interrupt, they're not going to hear it. And they can write things down if they need to, not a text. just don't send a text. A text can be interpreted in so many different ways. You know, a comma can mean one thing to one person and something completely different. I mean, we said this last week. How many times when relationships aren't going right, do you analyze, you know, all these messages that we get and think, oh God, what does that mean? And they've not left a kiss that time, and that seems really short. But you just don't know when the other person is writing this. Are they doing it in a rush? Are they doing it, you know, while they're waiting for their train and their train turns up so they finish it quickly? Or are they doing it at work before someone comes in and sees they're on the phone, you know? So I don't think text messaging is a good way to do it, but you need to find a way of chatting to him, because our lives are important. Our lives, you need to be happy. And I think I've said this a lot when we've spoke about being single, that single can be a great place to be happy. Having someone else in your life should be an added bonus, but you've got to be happy on your own. And the worst place that I think you can be, and I think if you've experienced it, you'll know what I'm talking about, is being with someone and being lonely is the most loneliest place of all, because there's just no escape from it. It's completely different to just being on your own. Being lonely with someone is a really hard place to be, and it's strength sapping and energy sapping. It's relentless sometimes. So you really need to make sure that, you know, like I said, you know, if you're not happy, there's your answer. You can't stay. Or if you do stay, something needs to change. And if people aren't willing to have a conversation with you about that, then you've got to find a way of making them listen. And once you feel like you've done everything that you can do, then you need to make the decision that you feel is right for you. And that is one that not someone else tells you. You know, like I said, I'll always give my opinion on things. I think giving advice can be very difficult because advice might suit me and might be completely wrong for someone else. So I think you can listen to other things, but you need to make your own decisions. So hopefully that has helped. So if you have any questions that you'd like us to give an opinion on, or me to give an opinion on, a guy's opinion, or whatever it may be, then send them in to us at 50 Shades and Grey on Instagram and on 50 Shades and Grey on TikTok as well. And you can contact us on our socials, or send us an email through one of the platforms that you use to watch the podcast. But thank you for all your support on the podcast. I love doing these. Sorry about my guest today. I'm going to get him back because I think it'd be a really good one to do with him. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow, and make sure you share as much as possible the podcast. Thank you again for watching 50 Shades and Grey. Take care, guys. Speak soon.